institutions in Chile promoted the fact that we are running this event here. I would like to give you some background of why we are here and what is Chile Tek on the Bay. So first of all, I'm Laura Chicorel. I'm from Chile. However, I've been around 14 years abroad in several countries and cities across Europe and US. I built companies abroad. Actually, I've worked longer abroad than in Chile. And I realized the fact that it's very hard building companies if you don't have a network. In my case, I struggled because I was switching from country to country, from city to city, and I still had this desire to build companies. But in any time, I had to start from scratch with no connections, no network, no, in many cases, not even industry knowledge of the local ecosystem. So now I live here. I'm a passionate entrepreneur, probably like many of you. And I'm becoming more aware. I'm working very closely with Chile in entrepreneurship and corporate innovation. And I'm becoming more aware of that. Like, I think it's an imperative need to create a deeper relationship, not just for the Chileans that are here, and deepen up the community of Chileans in Silicon Valley. I think we have an amazing amount of researchers, students, professionals, entrepreneurs, startups, and also all these companies in Chile that are looking to expand the operations here, and they don't even know where to start. So actually, that's the main reason why we have this topic discussion today, is growing and funding your company in Silicon Valley, coming from the voice of experts, as I call, to very experienced serial entrepreneurs, Chilean entrepreneurs, to give us their perspective of how they did it, so we can learn from them. And of course, from Mike, who is building a fund to invest in Latin American companies based in Silicon Valley. Of course, we have Armando, who is a partner here at Pillsbury, and he's been an amazing supporter, I would say, for the last 4 years to myself. With this and other groups I run, I also run a group for women founders in technology. And Pillsbury has been an amazing partner for around 4 years to me. So I'm very thankful for that. And as I say, we are deepening up the community and building a community of the Chileans in technology in Silicon Valley, and also providing a platform for companies and startups in Chile that are looking to expand to Silicon Valley. So they have a platform, connections. They can start from somewhere. And this is just the first one. This is the kickoff event of Chile Tek on the Bay. We have a partnership with Meet Latam as well. Probably you've heard about Meet Latam in Chile. We are developing a program together that it would be more extensive. More details will come soon. But this is just the first of one of many events. We are also planning to do more social events in the Valley. And of course, the idea is to open up the conversations to Chile so they can plug into what is happening here. So without further ado, I will invite you all. We have like an open dashboard in the back. So as in any community, it's about getting something from the community, but to build a real community, it's about giving back as well. So that's why we were encouraging you to ask, like, what is it that you are looking for? It's something that I did with the Women Founder in Technology group a lot, particularly larger networking events. So it facilitates networking. If you are approaching someone that you haven't met before, it will actually expedite the conversation, so you don't have to spend 15 minutes talking to someone to realize that they are probably just looking for a team member and they are not an investor, for example. It might not be the case among you because you probably know each other, but hopefully it will help you in the process. So again, in any community, the purpose is that you look to get something out of the community, but also to give to the community. So it could be contacts, knowledge, whatever it might be that you think it will serve as a purpose for the community. So actually we have a website, Chile Tek on the Bay, and we are inviting everybody to actually get the contact details in the community as well, so we can start building all this together. So I will leave you with Armando, who will tell us more about his experience working with Latin American companies.
Hi. So
You can use this.
So as Laura mentioned, I'm a partner here at Pillsbury. I'm in the Silicon Valley office in Palo Alto. And I've been working as a lawyer in Silicon Valley for 23 years. I went to Stanford Law School, and before that I worked at Ernst & Young. I was a CPA for 4 years, and then I've been doing this ever since. In the last 5 years, I've worked with more companies from Latin America than I had in all my previous career. When I first started working in the early 90s, we would see what I see now coming from Chile, Argentina, Mexico, all of these countries, but we saw it from India, from China. It's the same waves of people are coming in now, entrepreneurs, investors, all wanting to understand how work is done here. And many of the companies have strong similarities. The average company that I work with today that comes from another country in Latin America, typically their engineering teams are much stronger than an average US company. What I mean by that is that if there's 10 engineers, more than half of them will typically have advanced degrees, multiple PhDs, many people with PhDs or masters. Those were the advantages that the companies from India had in the early 90s. When they came here and they started getting established in the semiconductor space and the telecom space, those companies had very, very strong engineering teams. And we're seeing the same things now mostly out of Latin America. But as the companies come, there's a couple of questions that we ask them when we start working with them. The first question I ask them is, do you want to do business here or do you want to move here? Because there's a big difference, and they need to understand this before they come. Doing business here is, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's much easier than moving here. If you're going to move here, you're going to have to do a lot more work, and a lot of work before you decide to move. As Laura mentioned, the value of relationships here is very important. It's important everywhere, but I saw maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the government of Mexico had a incubator in San Jose called TechBot. And many of those companies failed, even after the Mexican government gave them startup capital, not a lot of money, maybe $10,000 they gave them to form the entity and get started here. But the reason they failed is that they didn't network. They stayed at the incubator, they went to work every day and spoke with the other entrepreneurs that were there, and they didn't go out and network with the other companies. It doesn't do you any good to be here if you're not going out and meeting with companies and meeting other entrepreneurs, investors, and understanding what is here. So events like this are a good start, but I would say if you're seriously considering moving here, finding whatever space you're in, finding out these conferences, I used to think they were not of much value, but they are of value because you could go and talk to your competitors. You could talk to the investors that work in the space and the larger companies that acquire them, the other companies that are there. And we see this every week because we'll have events either at the firm or we will go to events that we either sponsor or speak at or participate. 10 days ago, I went to Hungary to give a speech on Silicon Valley startups. It was called Internet Hungary. It was in Siófok, a city outside of Budapest. And the whole conference, they had half of the speakers were Americans, and the other half were not just Hungarians, but other Europeans that had been involved in moving their companies out from Hungary and into the US or from whatever country. Similar to the panel that you're going to see here today. And that was a 2-day conference. It was interesting to me that the questions that they asked me were on capital structure of the company, how you give out the shares. That's difficult for me to describe sometimes in English to the people that are outside of Silicon Valley. So when I gave this speech in Mexico to a company in Spanish, it was very difficult. Mexico, as you may know, only has one type of stock, acción. That's it. Here we have preferred stock, common stock, and many types of preferred stock. So I used a made-up word, un invento. acción preferida, my makeup word for the Mexicans. And the way that the stock is used to control the company is very important. And then the use of the stock options is also very important. Understanding that before you come here, that you're going to have employee ownership I don't know if it's common in Chile now with the tech companies there. Are the use of stock options for employees, is that common there now? Is it used a little bit? Yeah. Because outside of Silicon, even in the United States, outside of Silicon Valley, it's not used very much. The Japanese companies, they don't have it. So when they acquire companies here, the same with the Korean companies, when they acquire, they have a hard time compensating the US-based employees because they have to figure out a way to, the employees here, the tech employees expect to get equity compensation. And if you're going to get good engineers, you're going to have to get comfortable with that. But I would say the first, Laura asked me to mention, what are some of the pitfalls of companies that are moving here? I would say the first thing is understanding if you're moving or if you just want to do business. If you want to move, the first thing we would get you to is an immigration attorney. If you have a business, it is the easiest way to move. Because if you have a business where you have worked for at least 1 year, you're eligible for, I think it's called the L1 visa. And so that's a business immigration at that point in time. It becomes much easier. The e-visa is also easier, right? Because it depends on how much money is being invested. But addressing that with an immigration lawyer early before you start making that move will facilitate your move. Knowing, potential investors, advisors, lawyers. Lawyers here are different from lawyers anywhere else in the United States. We say that it's the lawyers here are more entrepreneurial. We're more like business people than the attorneys. Why? A big part of our job is making sure that we use all of the relationships of our firm for the advantage of our clients. How can we introduce a company that needs money to the potential investor or the investors to the company? But beyond that, how do you introduce a company that wants to sell to a larger company? If we have the relationship, can we make that introduction to facilitate business for the client? If the client has business, they have money, we can get paid. It's that simple. So earlier today, I was fortunate. We were working with a company that's moving here from Argentina, and they wanted an introduction to Samsung. Right now, that's an easy introduction for us because we have a senior lawyer that was in the Samsung legal department. He works in my office now. So he works on a lot of my clients. So he just picks up the phone and he's able to get in this case, he got them the correct introduction. He doesn't know. Samsung's very big, so you can't get him to all the right companies. But if you work with a small firm or a firm that doesn't do this type of work, in the past it was very traditional for companies from Latin America to go to law firms in New York because the New York lawyers had done a lot of the lending work into various countries in Latin America. Those attorneys don't work like the attorneys here. I'm not the only one that does this. The big firms have many lawyers like me that will tell you something similar. So I would say law firms could be a good source, and really going to as many of these networking events as possible in the beginning to meet more people and really find out, like you're going to find out tonight, how these gentlemen were able to be successful, so that you could start to get an idea of things that you might be facing. That I was going to finish.
Okay, thank you. Oh, this one. I don't think. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Thank you so much, Armando. Do you have any questions for him, by any chance? No questions? Okay.
I'll be here if you.
Yeah, he will be around.
We have a shy group.
He has to be here until we leave the room, so he will kick us out. So actually now we will start our panel. Maybe we'll bring another chair.
You want to sit here?
Or do you mind if I sit here? So it's great. I see some faces, ex-Startup Chile participants, which is great. So we are not just uniting the Chilean community, but also the local entrepreneurs. I see some familiar faces, so it would be great if you can connect with them afterwards as well, so they can give you some insights about their experience living in Chile. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming and accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is great.
Oh, no, I'm so delighted that you are all here. So as a starting point, I would like you to please briefly introduce yourself to them and maybe tell them a little bit about your background, your experience, and what are you working on right now, etc.
Okay, so I'll start, I guess. So I'm Luis Vera. I'm Chilean. I serial entrepreneur. I'm actually working on my third company now. The first company I, decided that I would start in Chile, would develop in Chile, make it big in Chile, and then come here. That ended up not working so well because, found the harsh reality that you have a really, really small market. So I learned what a small market was, and that you can't just scale because you get a customer, you get two customers, and then you run out of market. So decided to build Scopix, my next company, with focus in the U.S. But I still had the belief that I had to develop like the base product, the pilot product in Latin America. And so basically started in Chile, started doing the pilots and understanding what we wanted to do here in the U.S. And then raised about $10 million in Chile, and then came here to continue the business here, which, and we'll talk more about that. But and now I'm actually starting another company, which is 100% starting here with some contacts with Chile, but still, with using everything I've learned to take it to the next level. So serial entrepreneur.
That's excellent.
Is what I am. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Hennessy, and I'm not Chilean, I'm American, but I studied in Chile. I was one of the first students from the University of Washington to study in Santiago. We set up the exchange program, and have been involved in enterprise sales in Silicon Valley for about 15 years. And then after that, I got more on the investor side. So I've got experience as a limited partner in venture capital funds here. Also, I've done angel investments, including some in Chile and Latin America. And our latest initiative is something we're calling Puente Labs. And the whole purpose of Puente Labs is to, these guys went through the difficult times before there was a path or help, and they had to learn it. So what we're trying to do is help entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs from Latin America come to Silicon Valley and grow and scale their businesses.
So I'm also a Chilean. I studied, so mine is probably the less experience from all of these guys here. This is my first startup, and I would say my first startup being full-time in the startup, because I had other businesses, but until you're not full-time into it, I don't think you really feel and understand what it is to be an entrepreneur. So I came first time to the US in 2013. I went to a program called Singularity University that is run in Mountain View. So I did the long program there. So it was 3 months living there. And I met my partners there. So one is Mexican, the other one is Greek. And we came up with an idea that I didn't understand much at the time. That was basically to detect. My partner, she has been studying microRNAs or molecular biology for the last 10 years. So she said, well, I know this very cool molecule that if you detect it easily, it can tell you whether you have a condition or not. Oh, really? And what condition can that be? Well, it might be cancer, for example. So that could be interesting. And then went back to Chile. I was working at the time in a venture capital fund in Fundación Chile. I was working mainly in a high-tech company that was part of the portfolio. And then after a year, decided to quit that company and jump full-time into Miraculous, again, without knowing much about what was the company about, to be honest. But I guess the only way you get to understand where you are is by putting your full time into it and energy. So after that, we started with the company. We always thought about starting the company in the US. So we met here in Singularity. My partner was from Mexico, the other one from Greece, so it was hard to convince them to go to Chile and start the company there. And we knew at the time, after studying here for 3 months, that access to capital there's a lot more capital here than in Chile, especially for biotech. I don't know how many are you related to biotech here, but in Chile there are probably funds that really understand biotech, maybe 1, maybe 2. And in here you have just much more, and then we really wanted people to understand what we were doing. And again, in the US, especially here, you have Stanford, UCSF, Berkeley, and with that you have an amazing pool of talent that is willing to work on startups or and understanding biology the way that we really needed to. So from the very beginning, we decided to come here, and we closed a round in our first financing round in April this year, and that should take us to live for all of this year and the next one.
From local investors.
So yes, it was mixed. We have local investors, so big companies, and we have some investors from emerging economies. So we're very interested in having the US as a headquarters where you can have access again to capital, to talent, to people, but we are more focused in the market in emerging economies like China. So we have investors from China, big companies from there. And then from Latin America, we also have some investors.
Excellent. Wonderful stories, all of them. So I will probably start with asking you, I mean, you came in here, as you say, not being an entrepreneur. You came as an entrepreneur. How difficult was gaining credibility? Did you have your teams already formed? Well, you formed it here. You came probably with your team already formed. But how difficult was, or easy, was building your credibility and trust for them to really come and invest in you? How was that process? If you could share it with other people maybe looking to raise funding here.
For me personally, it was very difficult, and we had a good story. So we met at Singularity University. My partner, she has been studying. She's probably one of the leading experts in microRNAs in the world. So she has been. She published in Nature, Cell, so all of these very prestigious scientific publications. My other partner, he's an electronic engineer, but he's a serial entrepreneur. So this was his second company. He also developed the architecture for Uber. So he had a very good track record. We went to Singularity, which is kind of a known program in Silicon Valley. After that, we were invited to go to TED, to TED Global. So we came here with a kind of a solid pitch, and then we were having introductions from people that we knew that made it easier. But even with that, it took us a long time. So I remember going to pitch. We pitched in New York, Boston, North Carolina, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, and that was only in the US. In total, we pitched more than 100 times. And I remember a lot of those meetings, it was back in October, November. The first questions were, okay, so where are you from? Chile, Mexico, Greece. And you're moving to the US? Yes. So what about visas? And we're like, yeah, what about it? I mean, we'll get them. Do you have them? No, we are applying to it. Yeah. So where's gonna be your office at? We're looking for a space. Do you have the space? No, but we will have it. So imagine you have 30 minutes with an investor, right? Sometimes you get a bit more, maybe 40, sometimes less, 20. And you spend 10 minutes discussing about these things, which is something that is totally unrelated to the value of the company, where you have to convince them. So it took us a while to gain their trust.
Do you think the team that you had was like a plus? Of course, if the background really helped, no?
Yeah, it helped a lot, their track record. But again, not having someone from the US, I think it makes things a bit more complicated, especially because of that. I mean, a lot of, as you say, being a Chilean to move to the US is super easy. So I got my visa funded by myself, by my company, when I had $0 in the bank account. And the guy at the embassy was, so which is this company? It's Miraculous. And who's the owner? Well, me and some friends. Okay. And what are you doing there? I'm managing the company. Okay, here's your visa. So it's super easy, but investors don't really know that in the, I mean, not all investors know in the US that it's so easy to get a visa for Europe.
For Chilean.
For Chileans. No, for Europeans, it's another story.
Wait, business visas are easy.
Yes.
Personal, individual visas are difficult.
Yes, business visas. So, yeah.
I think you wanted to say something before?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the one thing from an investor perspective, investors hate uncertainty. And that's true across the board. So to the extent that you can remove uncertainty, because you have to realize that investors are looking at multiple companies in the same space. So if there's one company that has question marks about either visa or IP or location, they'll pass. So I just think to the extent that you can remove uncertainty, it makes it easier. I don't want to call investors dumb, but they just like to see it.
It's about mitigating risk. That's it. So yeah, so building on what they said. So I mentioned that, so I started in Chile with the idea of coming here, started raising money, founded the company in 2007. 2008, we were still trying to make it down, figure out if we could get a customer down there. 2009, started flying and getting customers here. Then around 2010, we actually landed a big account, which is Lowe's. We're in the retail space. And then we said, okay, now we got something. So we moved. Gabriel actually is back there. He's the first employee in the Scopix employee. So we started down there. He was the first scout that came here to open up the first office. And we started trying to talk to investors, and we had, all the advice was, get good lawyers. We had Dan Green, got to talk to the best investors in the Valley. And kind of like what you're saying, it's like, so you're from where? And what do people down there, do they want to have an exit? And so, and the thing that I think one of the mistakes that we did is that by the time we got here, we had raised about, we were still pre-revenue. We had raised about $10 million, and the investors own more than 55% of the company. So now it wasn't just selling me and my team, which was me and Gabriel, but it was, trying to convince them that the investors were something that was safe to invest in, because at the end of the day, in these companies, anything goes wrong and they lost their money, and so do we. So it took us 2.5 years, and talking to the best investors, saying that honestly wanted to help because they were part of the Endeavor network. I'm an Endeavor entrepreneur, and they'd say if you get a sales guy, we'll reconsider. And so I went out and I got, I don't know how I did that, but I got the SVP, for the senior vice president from SAP to come on board. So now it's like, oh, okay, now you're talking. And so we ended up getting a tremendous team. And then we were finally 2.5 years in, we were finally able to raise another $7 million. But it was extremely, extremely difficult. And like you said, talk to incredible amounts. We had we were working with big retailers, and it was a good story. But we also were in a very complex environment, which is retail. Silicon Valley investors don't really like the retail space because, historically they have not done so. It's a very, very difficult space. So I think that's so lesson number one is, try to start here as soon as possible here and start raising money here, because it's a lot easier to what Mike was saying, that if your early investors are US, there's a lot more trust that we're playing the same game. Because at the end of the day, I remember in meetings with the investors, they'd say, but do your investors want to exit? Because I hear there's a lot of government money behind it. So maybe they just want to build a big company and we're never going to be able to exit. And things like that we're like, no, everybody wants to make money here. So very, very difficult. And the other thing is that when you're abroad, when you're in Chile, the realities are very, very different. So I think I think had we been here earlier, I think we would have been able to spot the fact that retail was not a really good place to be operating way earlier than we did, and then before we had our made all this traction in this place. So anyway,
and I think that's a good point. This is a harsh reality for those of you that are doing B2B or enterprise companies. Your customers in Chile or Latin America have zero validation to a U.S. investor.
Zero.
Yeah. So in what I always recommend is, okay, if you sold to Unilever or JP Morgan or whoever it is in Chile, what you should try to do is find their counterpart in the U.S. in New York or San Francisco or wherever, and try and close a deal here, because the deals that are done in Latin America are not scalable or repeatable from a U.S. investor perspective. Consumer is a different category, but for the B2B space, that's the truth.
So it doesn't count as real traction, as they say. We have traction, we have sales. It's not representative of.
No, in my opinion, the only thing that it gives you is it gives you a good story to tell your potential customer, because you have experience, you've done it before, and you can relate and get you can get them to believe you that you know what you're talking about. But then I remember one meeting where we got so that I was with one of these big retailers, and I was with the SVP of operations, and she tells her second in command, says, "Why haven't I heard about this before?" And the guy says, "I don't know," because we had done it, and anyway, the thing is that, so can you, give me a list of your references? So I started giving them Latin America, so Cencosud, they at the time, so these big retailers in Latin America, and they're like, "What are you talking about? No, but these are big, I don't care, I want here in the US. And then I actually ended up getting thrown out of the meeting because I wanted to use them as a guinea pig. So she said, "I'm nobody's guinea pig," and she grabbed her things and left. And so I was escorted outside of the building. So it's and a lot of Chilean entrepreneurs that I meet, they're like saying, "Hey, I'm working on this and I'm going to grab my validation," and like Mike was saying, zero validation, zero.
Well, and the other thing is I don't know about everyone, but the way that I think about it in terms of time. So if you have an entrepreneur, you only have an hour or 24 hours a day. So an hour spent in Lima and an hour spent in Santiago is not equivalent to an hour spent in Palo Alto or in New York. So when I often get entrepreneurs say, "Well, I started in Chile, next I'm going to go to Peru because that's comfortable, or I'm going to go to Colombia because that triangle they do a lot of business together and it seems rational." Well, you're going to have to fly to different places. You're going to have to try and scale your business. I would say that, spend that hour, if that is your desire, come to the United States and do it here, because that 1 hour spent here is much more valuable than 1 hour spent in Lima, in my opinion.
That seems like, talking about building on what you were discussing before about dealing with investors, do you think, talking about valuation and the negotiation part of like term sheets and again valuation, do you think because of these like cultural differences and expectations played against your, for example, negotiation power?
In my experience, absolutely. And I think so. I think Armando was saying that the way you structure the boards and everything in Chile. So in my experience, in my example, so it was me as one of the board members and 4 investors as the other board members. And but everybody was in agreement that we had to raise money in the US and that we had to change the game. But we got here and we finally negotiated. We got Motorola Ventures to come in. We got a whole bunch of other investors. And they decided that, they were going to give the common, which was me and the employees, 2 seats. They were going to give 1 seat to the independent, which was none of them, and that all the new investors were going to be represented by 1 investor, and all the Chilean investors were going to have 1. So the 4 investors had to decide who was going to.
That's a very good outcome for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's very good to talk about this, particularly knowing that there are people that will, in Chile, that are listening to these stories, because I think they underestimate the power and the value of a board. You know, they think about, maybe the local context.
Yeah, I think it's different. I think I do value the way they do it but it's the way the investors are used to investing and the way they're used to controlling the companies. Here, the mechanism is completely different. And once you start to understand it, you start to understand why it works that way. But, it took me a long time to figure that out. And then it took us, once we closed the deal, it took us like 6 months before we actually were able to close the deal because of all these things. And then we had to flip the company it was very, 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 very complex.
People don't realize.
Yeah, and then that whole process, makes all the relationships, get harsh, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big issue. That's why, again, lesson is, if you want to come, like you said, to do business here, come as soon as you can. There is some value to start testing, doing your minimal viable products, but there's so many differences that it's highly recommendable to start operating here as soon as possible.
Earlier, going back to you, Alejandro, you built the company here, so you didn't face these problems. You kind of like built the company with a US structure. But did you feel that basically your team, international team, played against, or did you suffer in terms of the valuation of the company because of your background?
No, I wouldn't say the valuation of the company. I did pitch once in Chile. It was even earlier than before we started actually fundraising properly, and they were asking things that I didn't have. So I remember the first pitch I did to a VC fund in Chile. They asked me for a cash flow. So yeah, projected cash flow of the company for 5 years. And I said, I can draw whatever you want. I mean, we haven't even started the company. It was not even established at the time. And I said, well, so what, do you want me to invest in a company that don't have a projected cash flow? Well, yes. Being honest. Here, of course, no one asked for that. And when we started the company, we immediately decided, so the company was a Delaware company, even the bank, we had Silicon Valley Bank from the very beginning. And that's something that investors ask here. So where's the company established? In the US. And we have Silicon Valley Bank, immediately we were saying it. Just to eliminate, again, these risks, right? And then I agree with you in the sense that if you want to start a company here, or if you're planning to move to the US, then move as soon as possible, because when you start having this corporate structure, things become a bit more challenging. In our case, it was super lean from the very beginning. So we didn't even have a proper investment from Latin America before coming to the US. So the only investment we received, it was a convertible note. So they were not part of the board. They were not part of the structure of the company. They would basically convert at the terms of the next financing round. So, and then in terms of the valuation, what you do see in the US is that you have higher valuations than in Chile, at least from what I've seen. In our case, we went with a valuation. No one negotiated in the US. They said, okay, this sounds fine with kind of the vision you have, and I guess it will pay off. I didn't have the experience of pitching that in Chile, except for one investor that is Pablo Valenzuela, but he has been living here for many years and he really understands biotech, and he's the only Chilean investor in our company. But if I were with that same in valuation to a Chilean VC, I'm sure it would have been totally different output.
I just want to address one comment. We're talking a lot about coming to Silicon Valley, being in Silicon Valley. The one thing that I've seen and that we at Puente Labs encourage and support is what we call a hybrid company. So right now, if you look at Brazil in terms of the currency devaluation, if you look at Mexico, you can have a team of engineers, a team of marketing, or I think you can outsource key components of your company and keep them in country. So I've seen personally teams that have 20 engineers or 20 people in Santiago for the cost of 3 product people that worked at Facebook or Google here. So to the extent that you can leverage the the cost structure of employees in country, in Santiago, I think that can work really well. Now, it does require a strong leadership team to be able to manage the two-country aspect, but I think, I mean, it can work very, very well. The thing that I think investors are looking for, and I think Armando would agree, the IP needs to reside in the United States.
It can be offshore, but the U.S. company has to own 100% of the offshore entity.
And Chile is less of a, I mean, this is less, it's not, Argentina has some difficulties, but in Chile, owning the 100% of the entity that operates in Chile is just operational OpEx expense, whereas the IP and some of the things reside in the United States. That structure can work really, really well.
Yeah, and just to build on that, so we had our like executive team here in the U.S. and the rest of the company was in Chile. And to your point, I think, you know, we probably needed half of the money that we would have needed to do the same had we not done that. But that also has the other side of the coin is that it's it's much harder to manage, and you lose that team building. And you know, we had a lot of issues with you know, we needed to get this done, different cultures, the vacations, and you know, just, you know, a lot of times just a lot of cultural things that are just different in the way you execute. So to your point, it's like strong leadership is definitely needed, and it's also very advisable to, you know, have a trusted partner there on the ground too, because it makes all the difference.
And going back about the point, Armando was mentioning different type of shares. And in other countries, they are not very used to have stock options. And this is probably my next question is like, do you motivate or work with your teams abroad as if you work with your employees in US, or would you adapt your kind of like company culture and incentive back based on the local culture where they are based?
Yeah, so my experience is that and I don't know how it's now because it's been 5 years. It's a long time, but my experience is that the Chilean workforce, if you will, doesn't because they haven't seen exit. It's not like here you see, you know, Facebook. You know, you go play golf one day in the morning and the guy jumps into a Ferrari or something. So there's no tangible, you know, my friend next door is a millionaire. So they don't really believe nobody's going to take a salary cut for shares. And I think and here when you're working, and now that I'm starting another company, it's just incredible how much, you know, I have a lot of employees that I'm not paying them anything right now, just shares, and it really works.
In Chile?
Here.
Here.
But in Chile it does not. So, but then you have the other thing that it's a lot less expensive, but it's very difficult to motivate people with shares in Latin America, in my opinion.
Do you think that is changing, Mike, that you see many companies from other Latin American countries as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen on average somewhere between 10 and 20% of employees in Latin America receive equity compensation. Usually it's in addition to salary. And one of the things that I think, you know, obviously you offer equity for motivation. And if the motivation is not there, it can be challenging. So I would recommend one of two approaches. One is you just take the US approach and you say our salary is going to be X. We're going to give equity to everybody in the company. And I think, you know, that takes a leadership position to do that. And I think over the long term that would benefit. Or the other option is you give every employee the option themselves. There's two pay packages. Here's one that's salary only. Here's one that has salary with a component of equity. I'm going to let you pick. You choose.
Have you done something like that?
In our case, we also hire people we have software developers in Colombia that are very, very talented, and I would say the same level that you might find here and much cheaper. And we also have someone abroad in Greece. And so those three countries, Colombia, Greece, and the US, of course, is very, very different cultural and work kind of how they do it. So we, more than than to base ourselves in the country itself, we base ourselves in the individual. So we tell them, look, this is how we believe the company should run. These are the compensation package for the employees. All of them have an okay salary, so I mean lower than, let's say, market value maybe, but what stock options. And many of them don't understand it, so they're like, stock options, what is this? Well, they're shares that you will vest, and so you explain it, and they're like, yeah. And I'm not sure whether they understand it from the beginning, but at the end, I think they believe in you, and if you tell them that everyone else in the company is also doing it, so they're not just the special cases, they will feel comfortable with it. But I think it's really complicated when you start doing differences in between countries, right? So you have one country that is working under these conditions, then another country is working with another conditions, and another one. We are, in that sense, it's super transparent and universal to everyone. So, for example, we don't have holidays, or we have infinite holidays in our company. We don't really say. So they are like, can I take holidays? Yes. How many? I mean, however you want, that's fine. I'm not gonna control how many days you take off. And that's either if you're in Colombia, you're in Greece, or the US, it's exactly the same. So I think it's very important to kind of, you will still have some differences, but to try at least to standardize as much as possible, because when you start having these difference in conditions and people start realizing them, it can backfire.
And I recently saw an offer letter to an employee here where they listed a schedule that said, you know, here's your shares, this is if the company exits at this is the value. I don't always recommend that, because if you're promising compensation for equity, I mean, it's a binary outcome. They're either going to get compensated or they're not. There's nothing in the middle. So you have to be careful with how you phrase it in terms for employees.
Absolutely. So if you could describe in 2 sentences, maybe, like, what do you think, for the 3 of you, what are the main challenges you think companies trying to come to US face? The main challenges, the ones that are trying to do business, as Armando says, not coming here, like in this transition phase.
Yeah, so I think it's knowing the rules of the game and how it's played. I think it took me a long time to really understand how things operate, and to get funding and to get trust and to get good teams together. You have to be able to understand it so well that you can explain it. Like, for example, the shares that we were saying, you know, how you have to be the same with everybody. I totally agree. But you need to really understand from the grassroots why things are done in a certain way, and they've been studied, and I'm very impressed to see that, you know, things that, you know, maybe didn't make sense, they're there for a reason and they work. And but you really need to understand. So I think it's coming as soon as possible, trying to learn. You know, this is like playing a game. You want to play soccer, you need to know what the rules are before you start to play, because if not, you'll start, you know, making a fool out of yourself.
And if you could give an advice, like how to mitigate that risk or challenge, or
I think it's like what you're doing, these kind of initiatives.
asking you questions.
Yeah, no, but it's helping. It's providing Puente Labs. It's providing the bridge and the people, the expert. I think what Mike is doing is tremendously important, because, you know, I wish Puente Labs would have existed, because I had to go. I was looking for mentors, you know, to teach me, and I, you know, ran into some wrong people, and they're not trusted, and you don't know. So if I think what Mike is offering is, you know, and what you're doing is trusted people that can show you and teach you and explain, and you know, and if you have a question, you get help. And I think it's about the network. It's something else that I learned. It's, you know, a lot from my earlier years as an entrepreneur in Chile. You know, you focused on, and it's like the mindset, but you focus on the company and, you know, what you're doing, and you kind of start to focus on that. But it's really like Armando was saying, that you need to go and network and meet people and and get out of the building and go create relationships, because at the end of the day, that's what enables this to happen. And I think that's why Silicon Valley is such a great place, because that is kind of like the lawyers know what you're talking about. They understand what you're doing. They'll help you. You know, sometimes you can't pay them, and they'll say, okay, pay me later or whatever. The system is built to support something that's starting from the mentality of the employees that understand that you're starting, that you're equity rich and cash poor. So you know, it enables you to once you understand the game, it enables you to do things that are really, really empowering, that enable you to start from zero to something interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've seen that in Chile, the last 5 years have been, a tremendous change.
Yeah,
I remember 2009, and I'm not kidding. I mentioned the word networking, and many people didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So this
I've
was like 5 years of that. Since then, not even. 5 years, and people were not even used to go to public events to meet people. Actually, they asked me like, Laura, are you saying you go to an event by yourself with no friends, saying, hi, I'm Laura? And I was like, yes. And it was just like inconceivable for them, for all of 2009. So just 5 years. And I think things are changing, but I think it's very valuable what you're saying. It's like to go out and look for help in a not very supportive country, because I know they are more reserved in that sense.
Yeah, and for example, now there's these things called the meetups here that it's like people that, you know, to help or to I don't really know what the motivation is, but they have things like this, you know, 3 or 4 times a week. And you know, I was in one of these, and the guy was saying, you know, if you want to find, you know, your next tech partner, or you're a founder, you know, a founder tech, you have to go to these events. But don't go to the events where, like this event, which is all about executives and guys that are building business. Go to the geekiest event and just go sit there, and even though you won't know what they're talking about, just, you know, introduce yourself, start talking about what you're trying to do, and you'll start to meet people, and that's how it happens. That's the magic of this place. And I think it really, you know, it really leverages you to build things. It's built to build, if you will.
Great turn. Mike?
I think he went over his 2 cents.
I like to talk.
What was the question?
Well, yeah, or also the advice on how would you advise them actually to mitigate that risk or
I think
the transition?
I think specifically for Chileans, you know, Chileans are a little bit different than, say, an Argentine or Brazilian. So I would say, look, they don't know the school that you went to. They don't know what Catholica is. They know what MIT is, or they know what Harvard or Stanford is. So you have to do a little bit more explaining up front. And then I think the other thing, nothing paves the way better than getting traction in customers. So to the extent that you can build something that's real and have customers involved at an early stage in the company, that it makes a lot of issues go away. So if you can have a meeting with an investor and say, oh, by the way, I've got these types of customers. And how you get there, I think, is you have to lean on, you know, venture capital. You know, I'm going to date myself, but I lived in Chile in 1994. And none of this was even possible back then. But I think to the extent that you can find mentors, you can find advisors, you can find Chileans that have done it before, or anybody that's done it before, talk to your competitors on the US side and just learn as much as you can and seek advice and seek help. Don't be afraid. Nobody expects you to know everything. Nobody knows everything. You're going to learn as you go. And I think you need to err on the side of not being cautious, but being adventurous and saying, I don't know these things. Raise your hand and ask for help and find the help that you need. That's how you move forward.
Thank you. And you, Alejandro?
So I think one thing that helped us a lot before raising, probably like before start fundraising here in the US, is that we actually came to the US and visit some investors and tell them, look, this is what we're doing, and we plan to start fundraising in 5 months from now or 3 months from now. Is this something that you would be interested in? What is missing here? So again, being super honest with them. So you come from maybe Chile, this is your first company, or and you don't have all the answers of what they are thinking. So you can pose the question, and we did it. And we actually we visited that week around 10 investors. We went to some network events, and we were asking everything to everyone. So would you invest in this? Yes or no? Why not? What would you like this company to have then in 5 months for you to invest, or in 3 months for you to invest? And so I agree with Mike in the sense that if you can talk to people, that's the most valuable lesson you can get. So when you start fundraising, at least in our case, there were 3 key things. One is to have everything very, very, very polished in terms of corporate governance, papers, legal work. That should be bulletproof, because an American audience, when you start fundraising here, is very, very strong. Second, if you can ask, in our case, we got introductions to every single investor we met. We tried to get to investors without an introduction, and we didn't have one positive answer. And it was a good email. At least that's what people said. But if you don't know them, it's very difficult to get a meeting with an investor for that particular time. So that's the second one. And the third one is when you come here, you cannot come just to try it. Like I'm going to invest for 1 month or 2 months and see how it's going to be, because it will fail for sure. If you come here, then that's it. You come here and there's no plan B, because otherwise they will notice it. I mean, you can really tell when someone is super convinced about moving here and staying here and actually trying to build a company from when someone is just coming here for a month to try luck and then see if I get funded, then I will stay. No, that's not the correct answer. I will stay here no matter what. So I think that's my advice.
That is great. On the positive side, do you see any advantages that they have organically? If there is anything to highlight, like you would say, for example, you were talking about the good teams that you had in Chile, they were much cheaper. So loyalty as well.
Right. So I think the teams, the people in Chile are, they're fantastic, and I think in this venture I'm going to figure out a way how to make that work. I think the investors, I was very lucky. I had some very, very good investors that supported me, the whole way. Also, brought on by Endeavor, that very, very important work that they do is helping you get out. I think if it hadn't been for all that, the teams, because we had some really, we created a lot of value. And that was done by Chilean. It's fundamentally Chilean investors, Chilean team, Chilean everything. And here we are only 6 Americans in the U.S. The team was built by, we had 5 other Americans other than me. So there are definitely a lot of positives. I think the only thing is that you keep that part, which is good. But you get here as soon as you can, because again, it's a game. The rules of engagement are what you really need to understand.
Yeah, Mike, if you could tell also, remember this is broadcast in Chile, so it would be great just to see. What kind of companies are you looking in Puente Labs, or in the future? Would you be interested in what space, what kind of traction? Like we got it clear that Chilean traction doesn't count, but what kind of metrics would you like to see to get a company to invest in?
Yeah, and so I should be clear about this. What we're looking for, we require one of the founders to live here permanently. We require it to be a Delaware C Corp structure. And in terms of traction, we're looking, it's different in terms of sector. We're open. As long as we can find somebody to evaluate it. I wouldn't know how to evaluate his company, but as long as we can find somebody that has the skill set, we're open. We have a lot of expertise in enterprise SaaS. I would say in terms of traction, we would want to see customers in the US, maybe not a lot of them, but a handful. And a willingness to move here and be here. And I think, I think those are, so we're not, the days of PowerPoints, MVPs are over. Just to be clear about that. I think every investor in the Valley, including some sophisticated angel investors, are looking for real companies with real revenue. And I think for us, what we're looking for is companies that have the ability to scale. So when we look at a company, we have the things that we look at are very similar to most venture capital firms. You look at the team, you look at the competition, you look at the market size, and then revenue run rate for us is we're looking for companies that have a legitimate chance to get to $100 million in annual revenue. It's not going to happen right away. It might be 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, but category leading companies that are doing something unique that can compete on the US. So by default, no copycats, nothing that's specifically targeted on Latin America. We're looking for the brightest minds and the entrepreneurs that are willing to take their companies to a global scale. So we're setting the bar pretty high, but it could be any sector in any segment, but we're looking for that kind of DNA. And then as far as complementary skills go, obviously for us, we're investors and business people, so we're looking for hardcore technical skills. So we can teach and we can help with the business side of things, but we're looking for really, really talented technology.
And are you seeing high quality companies coming from Latin America right now? Anyone from Chile particularly?
Yeah, we've engaged with lots of Chileans and Argentines and Brazilians, and yeah, the companies are very strong. I think from a US perspective, the thing it's changing, but I think the thing that in the past has been missing from Chile specifically and Latin America as a whole, two things. One is a global vision. So that we're thinking a little bit smaller is what I would call point-to-point solutions. So you solve A to B, and what we're looking for is companies that are looking at a global market and have that sort of global ambition. And then I think on the other hand is part of that is a function of not having a very advanced venture capital ecosystem in Santiago. I mean, most of these firms are 6 years old or less, or maybe 8 years. So it's difficult, and you see this in Brazil and Mexico and other places as well, is you have the sort of 80-20 rule where the entrepreneurs are spending 80% of their time doing non-core things, consulting or, to bring money in the door to pay for the 20% things, which are the platforms and the scale. So when that flips, I mean, it's easy to say, hard to do. If you're Twitter and they say, here's $10 million, go figure out this 140 character thing without, or you're Google and you're going to create another search engine, just go figure it out. They had the runway to iterate and make mistakes and change the direction and pivot of the company. Because remember, Twitter was, originally it was Audio, which was a video podcasting company, and Twitter was a little bit of an offshoot of it that became what it is today. So that kind of experimentation, that kind of iteration, that kind of thinking is a function of having capital so that you're not trying to pay your bills for the next month. So I think those are the two things that I think are changing quickly, but in the past have been a bit of a trouble from an investor perspective. Just to be clear, the consulting businesses, other than Globot, which is growing by scale and bodies, are typically valued at 1x revenue, if that, whereas the platform plays are the ones that can get the 20, 100, 1000x type returns.
Excellent. Is there something you want to add? No?
I would say that being a Chilean, even though it has its complication coming here and all of these legal structure and visas and moving, it has also, in our case, coming from emerging economies, it was a strength in the way that we said, we come from emerging economies and we want to go after emerging economies. So there's, I don't know if this is a trend that is just now becoming a trend or it's been there for a long time, but there's a lot of people that really believe in emerging economies as a market. So it's not only this product that is only targeted to the US or to Europe or to developed nations, but actually seeing emerging economies as a huge market that is growing very, very fast with a middle income class that is growing faster than anywhere else in the world. So coming here and say, look, we have the connections in our countries. We are now, for example, working with the National Health System of Mexico, which is could be a huge customer. Same thing with Peru, with Chile, China. So coming from emerging economies is not always bad. Actually, in our case, is a very good asset that we have in the company, and investors realize it that way too. So it's not. I don't see it as a negative aspect under any circumstance.
Excellent. I just want to make one comment. Actually, I was like biting my lips to say so. I think also culturally, the speed that things here move fast, and I think many Chileans probably are not very used to the fast speed that things move. I mean, I can give you an example. I sent an email last night at midnight. By 7 a.m. this morning, I have an answer from the 3 of them. So, thank you. So that tells you two things. People work till very late. People answer emails within 24 hours or 48 hours, and things just move fast. I think Chilean culture is like, I got your email, I never say anything. I think there are also like the way we deal with people, meetings. I think there are like very soft things to say, maybe that are not very, some people will consider not very important or a priority, but people too, I mean, the same with behavior during meetings as well, being on time. Like, again, they could sound like soft advices, but I think they make a big difference. I received feedback from some companies dealing with other Chilean companies, and they all struggle with, the lack of response or being slow to respond or the way they respond. So I think there are also these kind of like relationship building. As you see here, as we were talking before about community, people do spend some time with you. They will go for a coffee with you for an hour or 2 hours sometimes if they like you. Just to help you, maybe hear your story, and they will find some connections. Until you will say like, why would I meet you for 2 hours? I don't even know you, and I'm meeting you just to help you. But people do it, and not young people, senior people. So it's part of like the culture of giving and receiving, and this is probably something in the mindset that has to change. I think innovation requires collaboration. So it's not about just getting, it's about giving as well. So I think these like internal codes that we see every day, someone that you can actually send an email. I have like hundreds of examples. People are just being on LinkedIn. Hey, I think I can find some value. Let's grab some coffee, and people grab the coffee, and then they will spend half an hour introducing you to other people in meetings, to have meetings, So it's just dedicating time for the other ones, knowing that they will probably see that this contribution they had probably will have a result in a year or 2 years, or maybe never.
Yeah, but I just want to make one clarification on that. Don't go and email all the VCs and ask them to have coffee. I don't expect you'll get a good result, but I think you're right to the extent that if you have a specific ask and that ask is easily solvable, then just make it easy for us. So an example, sending me an email and saying, hey, I want to have coffee without a date, a time, anything around it, I probably won't respond. But sending an email saying, hey, Mike, I noticed you were connected to this person. My company does X. This person does Y, which is very complementary to what I'm doing. I want to hire them, talk to them, meet them. Do you think that's a good fit? And sending an email that says, that says that I can then, and this is a very important thing to talk about, the double opt-in intro, which everyone should know, which is basically, if you email me to meet Luis, I will take your email and I will send it to Luis and say, Luis, do you want to have this meeting? And if he agrees, then I will connect you. And I think it's a very simple thing, but if you just send the email without doing that, then it puts me in an awkward situation because now I'm vouching for you in front of Luis. But so I think doing things like that, like making it easy for the person that you're approaching to make the connection. And if you've crafted the email, you sent it to me, and it's a well-crafted email, and I think it's a good fit for Luis, and I know it's what he's looking for, it's very easy for me to do that. But if I have to go on LinkedIn and copy your profile and go here and rewrite it and do it's good. those types of requests tend to die. But I think clear, succinct action with very clear, precise, I noticed you work at this building, I have 20 minutes on Thursday, does this time work? I mean, those kinds of things, while they're not necessarily the most warm and fuzzy, they get the kinds of results that I think you're looking for.
Yeah, it's what I was saying, it's learning the rules of engagement. It's how you play the game. And it's what you were saying about the meetings. And like, for example, when we were in Chile trying to do something the earlier years, I remember I had this meeting, we were trying to get a meeting with this SVP or like number 2 or number 3 in a big retail chain. So I remember I was sitting down in the lobby and then, waiting there like, maybe half an hour or something. And then, hey, we had a meeting and they go, oh, he didn't come today. And so then I remember I go, okay, we'll try it again, and we did it again and the same thing again. And here in 5-6 years, never has somebody not been in a meeting when I had to fly somewhere, which would be very, very expensive if somebody did not show up to a meeting, or not even a conference call where nobody shows. That does not occur.
It's unthinkable.
It's yeah, and it's so different, and you have to learn those rules. Because when you don't play by those rules, then you lose credibility. And then if you went into a meeting and you had the possibility of getting here, you start off down here, so you can only get here at the best because you screwed up something that was really easy to do right. And that's what you learn.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So now we will have some time for questions.
So when you talk about moving here, I was wondering if, in your experiences, if you've had any companies that have tried to come to the U.S. by going to Miami.
Yes.
Yes, and how did that work out for them?
Well, I think it just depends on what your company does. Like, for example, if you're in fashion or finance, New York is an acceptable place to be. If you're dealing in hardware and software and, you need to be connected to Cisco and all that, I think you need to be here.
I was just asking the question because our firm does some business in Florida. They were asking us to visit Miami, so I did that, and I met a few companies. If you're doing tech, Miami's a nice place to visit. That's not where you're going to do business. You have to come here. And they say here, Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and I think culturally, Miami is somewhat closer to Latin America than it is Silicon Valley. I'll just say that.
It's Latin capital of the United States.
Don't be shy.
Any questions?
Can you share some data with us? You said there's some trends that you've seen, but I'd like to know how many Latin American companies have set up in the US in the past year or two. How many of those companies are Chilean and how those companies are doing, especially the ones that set up camp maybe 2 years ago. That you may be funding or not funding.
Yeah, I'll just give you some pipeline data, and this isn't funded, this is just anecdotal, so take it for what it is. I looked at it recently. I'd say out of the companies that I see here in the US, and I keep track of the ones that I meet with, I'd say we're looking at probably somewhere around 35% Argentine. I'd say Brazilian is probably somewhere in the high 20s. Chileans, I think, are probably more in the 9 to teens. And Colombia is probably right around there, maybe a little higher. Mexico's less for some reason because they tend to want to focus on their bigger markets. So Mexico is such a big market, so they're less. Brazil and Mexico are more internally looking, I think, for their markets. Although that's changing now with Brazil a little bit. I don't know if that's helpful. And then a little bit of Ecuador, Uruguay, and some others that are making some noise as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, but I will just to answer on the Chileans have. You talk about Chilean strengths. The Chileans have a very strong network in California. There's the Chile California Council. You guys have a ton of Chileans at Stanford and Berkeley, and there's a deep connectivity. I would say Chile's connectivity to Silicon Valley is stronger than Spain. It's stronger. Argentina has their own that's pretty strong, but you guys have a pretty deep network in the Valley.
So just to add to that, that's exactly what we are
trying to build with Chile Tek on the Bay is actually deepen that relationships and connections, because there are a lot of networks, but there isn't like a structured network where anyone even coming from Chile that doesn't have access to that network could leverage these connections.
Yeah, and one of the things we're trying to do with Puente Labs is we are a fund that's part of what we do, but we also have some mission-driven statement where we want to connect Latin America to Silicon Valley. So we do host events, and we do all sorts of things to try and help Latin Americans talk and meet with Silicon Valley types in a non-stressful boardroom environment. It's more of a social context. So we'll be doing some of those as well.
That's excellent. Any more questions? Anyone? No? You must be tired. You had a long day.
Or we were very clear.
Oh, we were very clear. I hope it was very clear. So anyway, thank you so much. I hope you find this valuable. Did you like it? Yes?
Yeah.
Great. No, kind of. So it will be great. Again, if you could network, of course, with other attendees. I mean, there aren't only Chileans, as I say, there are some locals as well, entrepreneurs. So it's a great instance to get connected. And again, I encourage you to write in the board. If there is, if you could write your email or your name or both, hopefully, and specify if there is something in particular that you are looking for, so we can help you with, and if you have something to offer to the community. So thank you very much for coming, and there's some wine, beer, and I hope you stay till late. Well, we have to leave.
It's like the US gold funds. You raise for every dollar they give you $3.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys will go. Because he's building.
Oh, you did? But it's a 16th, right?
Okay.
Get in
So
the-
the right? You can raise 4.
Yeah. Yes, this is one. But my phone is in the low limit, not in the high limit. The limit for phone is for complete is
Requiere que la propiedad actual se recibe los.
No, lo único que requiere es que lo único que requiere es que la compañía cobre